Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Midweek Connection. I hope everything is going well with you during these warm days. You know, it was just a year ago that I was on this property and I made the following statement. I got weeds. Man, do I ever got weeds. And the crazy thing is, I didn't do anything to get them. And that's the problem. I didn't do anything. That's why I got weeds. Man, did I ever have weeds. But today, it's a different story. Boy, howdy. How things can change in a year. I am just amazed. Last summer, at this time, we didn't have any idea that we would be locked down for almost a solid year or more. We had no idea, and it's pretty nice blessing to pretty much for the most part be opened up again. But again, what a difference a year can make in a person's life. This last year I have really learned some lessons from some friends and through a lot of hard work and devoted intentional time, how to get on top of the weeds. But I also know that I'm going to have to keep on top of those weeds, because if I don't, those weeds, I know for sure and for certain, as you do, are going to come back with a vengeance. Same thing is true in our spiritual lives. In order for us to stay on top spiritually, we need to make sure that we are putting in the devoted time, the intentional devoted time daily that is necessary for us in order to make our spiritual lives happen. Jesus said in Mark chapter 4, he was talking about the parable of the soils, and he talked about how spiritual fruitfulness or barrenness was dependent upon the kind of soil that a plant was planted in. And Jesus warned that there were things in the world that would choke out the little seeds, thorns and weeds and those kinds of things would squeeze the life out of that fruit-producing seed. And he said it in verse 18. He said, "Still others, like seed sown among thorns, hear the word, but the worries of this life, the deceitfulness of wealth, and the desires for other things come in and choke out the word, making it unfruitful." Jesus is telling us that we need to learn to deal with the spiritual weeds that want to get in and choke out the wonderful spiritual life that he has for us. And we have a lot of distractions in this world, a lot of things that want to draw us away from our spiritual lives. They do everything they can to keep us away from the life of peace and joy and happiness, the abundant life that Jesus wants for us. So, how do we keep the spiritual weeds out of our lives? Well, here's the deal with weeds. I learned this as a boy growing up on the ranch. My brothers and I got weed detail. That was never really a lot of fun, but it was part of what we did to help do our part on the ranch. And I remember my dad telling us, and he was a stickler on this, because he really didn't want those weeds coming back. And actually in the day when I was growing up, we didn't have a lot of the chemicals that are available today to take care of weeds. And so a lot of it was done by hoeing and pulling. And my dad, as I said, was a real stickler on making sure that if you were going to take care of those weeds, you're going to get them up by the roots. He'd always say to us, if you don't want to pull those weeds again, you make sure that you get them up by the roots. And we, as boys, lots of times we wanted to just get the job done so we could go do something else. And so sometimes we just snap off the tops of those weeds, and it looked pretty good, but it did not get the roots. And that was the thing that Dad knew, that if you didn't get the roots, those weeds were going to come back, and like I said, come back with a vengeance. And so what you want to make sure is that you were serious in pulling those weeds. And that's what's happened to me in this last year. I've been real serious in pulling and in poisoning and in plowing under these weeds that have were so prevalent out there. They're just, it was amazing. It was a daunting task in my mind as I looked at that lawn out there. My goodness. So I had to get very, very intentional, and I have to be intentional in order to stay on top of it. So how do we stay on top of the spiritual weeds that want to come into our lives? Well, there's a passage of Scripture that we find in Ephesians chapter 3 and verses 16 through 19. And I'd like to just go over this with you this morning. It says, "And I pray that Christ will be more and more at home in our hearts." Finding out that the more I let Jesus be the master and ruler of my heart, the better my life is, and the less chance of those spiritual weeds getting an opportunity to come into my life. So, more and more at home in our hearts, living within you as you trust in Him. Here's the part that I really like now. We're talking about pulling weeds up by their roots. Well, we want to talk about putting our spiritual roots down deep in God's good soil. So Paul says, "May your roots go down deep into the soil of God's marvelous love, and may you be able to feel and understand, as all God's children should, how long, how wide, how deep, and how high His love really is, and to experience this love for yourselves, though it is so great that you will never see the end of it, or fully understand it. And so at last, you will be filled with God Himself." How do we keep on top of the weeds? Well, daily, devoted, intentional time spent with Jesus. That's the best way I know how to keep on top, is just keeping on with Jesus. And as we do that, keeping that focus the way we should, we can sit back and we can enjoy the fruits of our labor as we drink a nice glass of sweet tea, sit under the shade of my patio cover, and just enjoy these moments with you. So if you got any weeds, you don't have to have them. You can get rid of them. The Lord will help you do it. And I believe that with all my heart. So, God bless you. I hope you have a great week. Just remember, happy trails and stay narrow.